Good morning, everyone. This is Bernd Christian Giels coming to you once again on Thursday, July 9th, 2020. I am recording again from the same spot as I did in episode 16. This is episode 17, which is, in a sense, a continuation of the previous episode. So I invite you to watch episode 16 for context regarding what I'm going to share in this episode. So as I said, today is Thursday, July 9th, 2020, and in the news today, as has been in the news for many, many days and weeks now, is the coronavirus pandemic here in the United States of America. As many of you likely already know, the pandemic is now growing at a very worrisome rate here in the country, specifically in the American Sun Belt. States such as Texas, Florida, and Arizona are of particular concern at this time, given the rates of growth in reported new daily coronavirus infections. I actually wrote an article this past weekend focused on those states with some policy conclusions and recommendations at the end of that document. If any of you, my viewers, would like to read that document, you can email me and I will more than happily provide that to you. So, episode 17, like I said, is a continuation of episode 16. In episode 16 this morning, I spoke about the particular community of people, both in the United States and throughout the world, who have immunosuppressive or immunocompromised health considerations, health concerns. Here in the United States of America, I would estimate, based on the size of our population and the research that I did, that something like 13, 14 million American citizens most likely have immunosuppressive, immunocompromised health concerns. Now, that very well might also be an undercount because when you consider reported rates of different healthcare problems, you have to take into account the fact that some people will not seek out medical care until they are basically in a crisis, and the reason they might not seek out care until they're in a crisis could be a number of reasons or factors at play. Some people don't seek out care because it's cost prohibitive, even with their insurance. Other people don't seek out care because they are very stubborn and don't wish to be treated by doctors because perhaps they have trust issues or concerns about the training of the healthcare providers that would give them care. So, there's a number of reasons that the number of immunosuppressive and immunocompromised people in this country may be lower, the reported number may be lower than the actual number here in this country. So, what am I going to talk about today? I'm going to talk about something called the power of choice. And the reason this naturally follows the last episode is because I'm going to speak about the power of choice and how what we do as individual human beings can dramatically impact the lives of those immediately around us, even if we're not intending for that to happen. And when I see stories in the news about the spread of the virus, one of the things that often is a consistent theme is that people are getting sick by going to certain venues. Some of those venues that have been the origin points of clusters of subsequent infection are bars. There's been stories about people getting sickened at a birthday party. There was also the fact that a number of coronavirus cases in southwest Georgia, in the vicinity of Albany, Georgia, were attributable to a funeral. And so it's very clear from the data that has been reported so far and the stories that we're seeing that the pandemic can spread through any number of social events and activities, and that therefore it is wise, as we've been advised to do, to limit our contact with other people and to especially restrict, if not completely eliminate, any activities where we would go to a place with a number of people, like in a crowded room like you would find in a bar, or like you might find at a well-attended birthday party. And in no way am I saying that I don't think people should have these events. I am saying that we need to be mindful of these types of activities during the current pandemic, because it does appear that this is a fairly contagious virus. And recent news has even been suggesting that there might be a mutation in the strain of the virus that's even more contagious. So I would argue that the current situation necessitates a certain level of caution, which is far from minimal caution. So the power of choice. What I mean by that in connection with the last episode is sometimes one single choice that we make dramatically impacts our lives and the lives of other people. And there are countless examples of this truism that one choice can change the world. Think, for example, about voting. Voting is a choice. When you choose to vote for a person for an elected office, you are saying that you believe, as I see it, you believe that this person is suitable and appropriately prepared to take on that particular job. And I would argue that the more significant the job, the more ponderous the responsibilities, the more people that might be affected by the person holding this job, the more thoughtfulness and caution and research we should use in considering who to vote for. And I mean that for any position, whether it's a local government position or a federal government agency job, which many of those are not elected, obviously. They are people that are either appointed or they are hired. They are not necessarily elected by a body of people. And then, of course, you have the example of the President of the United States. That is an elected position. And in the 2016 election, a large number of American citizens didn't vote at all. And so de facto, I would say, they basically said, by not voting, whoever wins is something I'll just accept and live with. And look at the situation that we have now. We have a major public health crisis on our hands that is worsening by the week, while our president does very little to contain this dreaded situation. There are many choices that we as individuals make in our daily lives that can dramatically impact a person around us, a whole community of people. Consider, for example, if you have your own car and you have a driver's license and you're out driving one day and you race to catch a green turn arrow because you're in a hurry for whatever reason. And you make that turn in an intersection when that light has already turned solid red and you really shouldn't be making the turn, and you broadside someone in that intersection. And maybe the person in the other car is a pregnant woman, or maybe the person in the other car is someone who is still recovering from an injury, and now they've been broadsided by your vehicle and have a new problem to deal with. Let's take the example of COVID-19. Let's say that you're not feeling well, and you maybe have a few of the symptoms that are associated with the pandemic, with COVID-19, but you don't have many of them. And you're not feeling that bad. You think maybe it's allergies, maybe it's poor air quality, maybe you got a fever because it's just, a cold, even though that's not necessarily real common with colds. So you're not feeling great, but you're not feeling like you need to stay home. And so you decide one day to go out shopping. And you go to some place that has recently partially reopened. And perhaps, you go inside a business. And you have a mask and you're wearing it. But then when you see other people not wearing their masks, or when the business doesn't require you to wear a mask, you take your mask off. And in the time that you're in the store, you linger there for maybe an hour. You're browsing around, you're looking at different things for sale. And then, in that time, you inadvertently spread this thing, this virus, to several other people in the store, including a few elderly people who are visiting from out of town. Perhaps they're visiting from another state. They're on a trip to have fun. They're retired. They're in your state because they're visiting their grandchildren. And so they inadvertently get infected, and then they go back to where they're staying. Perhaps they're staying with one of their adult kids. And unknowingly, those two people, let's say this is two senior citizens, a married couple, been married for many years. They go back to stay with their adult child, and they inadvertently expose him and his wife and their children, these senior citizens' grandchildren. And then they leave, and they still don't feel at all unwell. And they drive back to wherever they live. And along the way, they stop for gas, and they inadvertently expose a fuel station attendant. And then they get back home to where they live, still feeling fairly good. They go about their lives, and they eventually, right before they start to show symptoms, they expose a few more people. Now, that's just one example of what can happen. This is a hypothetical scenario, but I wouldn't be surprised if something very similar to what I have described has happened somewhere in this country of 330 million American citizens. So the point is that we don't know a lot of things. We don't know a lot of things about this virus even now. We don't know a lot about the long-term damage that it necessarily does to some people. We are seeing stories now about people who are sick with symptoms for months and are still recovering. People who have any number of problems. They have problems with scarring in their lungs, perhaps. They have maybe brain fog. They are listless. They don't rest easily. They have very little energy. We are still, at this point in the year 2020, combating the human immunodeficiency virus, the virus that leads to AIDS. That virus entered the world population in the 1980s, over 3 decades ago. We are still dealing with that virus, and we are still trying to care for all of the people in the world that have that virus. So the coronavirus pandemic, we have been dealing with this pandemic for about 6 solid months now. Here in the United States of America, it's been about 3.5 solid months. So we're talking about only roughly about 100 days. We have been dealing with this for about 100 days. And meanwhile, the AIDS epidemic that started 35 plus years ago, we still have people with AIDS. We still have people with the virus, with HIV. That hasn't disappeared, and we have not found a cure for it. So the fact is, we don't know a lot still, 6 months in, to what this virus ultimately does to the human body in a large data set. As more and more people become infected, and as more and more people become ill or die, we will gain more understanding. But that understanding comes at a serious price. It comes at the price of illness. It comes at the price of death. And therefore, it is very wise to be cautious. It is very wise to be thoughtful about the power of the choices that we are making. And as a way of concluding this particular episode, I want to speak a bit about one of my favorite movies that I see as a meditation on the power of choice. And I'm going to move some because the light is doing fun things with my head. One minute. All right, much better. So, the movie that I'm talking about is the movie Castaway. And I'm not going to do a big spoiler on this movie either. If you've never seen it, I highly recommend it. It's one of the most powerful movies, in my opinion, that I've ever seen. And the reason I feel that way is because I see the movie as a meditation on many major themes of human life. And one of those themes is the power of choice. And in brief, the plot features Tom Hanks playing a FedEx engineer who one day around Christmas Day jets off over the South Pacific on a work call. And he leaves behind the woman that he dearly loves, whom he is obviously interested in marrying one day. And as he boards the plane, or prepares to board the plane, as he walks away from his girlfriend, he famously says, "I'll be right back." And it proves to not happen. His plane crashes in the South Pacific, and he is the lone survivor and ends up on a deserted island. I will not share the conclusion of the movie, but I will say it's a very emotionally powerful ending. So this movie, I think, is a great meditation on the power of choice, because Hanks's character makes one choice one night, and at the time, from what you can see in the movie, he doesn't give it a single bit of thought that this one choice he's making could change the course of his life forever. He says, "I'll be right back," planning to be right back. And it doesn't happen that way. So my point is that we don't necessarily know the full consequences of the choices that we make. If we go out in public and we get drunk, or we get infected with this virus and we don't know, we can make choices that will radically impact our lives and the lives of those around us, both those that we personally know and care about and love, as well as complete strangers. I'm going to move more back because the light is still bad. Finally, much better. So, the power of choice. One choice can make all the difference in the world. And as I conclude this episode, I'm going to leave you actually with one other recommendation for something to watch. And I don't even know if you can find it on YouTube or if it's even available as a DVD. It was made so long ago that it might not even be easily accessible, if accessible at all. But many years ago, I saw, it was like a made-for-TV movie, and it was the story of the woman who started Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And as I recall, the story was set, I believe, in the state of California. And the movie was basically based on a true story. It was based on the life of this woman who founded Mothers Against Drunk Driving after her own teenage daughter was mowed down by a car being driven by someone who was inebriated. It's a fascinating and very tragic and sad story. But the beauty of it is that something good came of it. This mother chose to take the pain and suffering she felt, the darkness inside of herself from the grief of losing her daughter, and she created an organization that would ultimately raise awareness about the powerful harm and danger that can happen when people drive inebriated, when they drive drunk. So I welcome you, I invite you to watch that movie if it can be found, and to watch Castaway, and to consider these movies as invitations to reflect upon the power of the choices that we make each and every day of our lives. We don't necessarily know what our choice is going to lead to. We have very little control, oftentimes, of much of what is happening even immediately around us. The only people that we can change fundamentally are ourselves. The only choices that we can really fully control and be responsible for are the choices that we make for ourselves. So what I invite all of you, my viewers, to do is to consider the power of the choices that you make. Consider the potential outcomes of the choices that you make. When you wake up in the morning, consider who it is you want to be. Consider what choices you are planning to make for your day. And then consider what are the possible impacts of my choices, not just for your own life, but what are the ways your choices could impact the people you love, the community that you live in, and the lives of complete strangers who will very likely cross your path on most days. Because most days those of us who live in the world and have active lives, we come across at least a couple people every day whom we've never met before. So what kind of person do we want to be? What kind of choices are the choices that will align with who we want to be? So I invite you to contemplate the power of choice. And on that note, I am going to say goodbye for another day. Thank you very much for watching this episode. It is episode 17, The Power of Choice. As I said at the beginning, I welcome you to watch episode 16 for some context for this episode. I will be back tomorrow on July 10th. Probably still recording under the airplanes. As I continue to search for a more suitable place to record. So thank you very much for watching today as this channel continues to evolve. And I wish you all a most blessed day, and I'll talk to you soon.